let me offer a very kind of basic but thought-provoking question. We used to, in understanding psychology and human behavior, we would ask the question, is it nature or is it nurture? Does behavior come from genetics or what we're taught? And what we finally understood is it's both. When 100 and plus years ago, scientists were trying to understand, is light a particle or is it a wave? And same answer, it comes back, it's both. And we know that now as quanta and quantum theory results from that. And today, I want to just thought-provokingly suggest that this debate that sometimes happens, where should we work? What should we work on to improve the organization? Should we just make our processes even more rigorous and really put emphasis on those processes? Or should we do some type of cultural change and have more dialogues and discussions? And I'm here to say it has to be both. Now, there are pieces and symptoms that we don't want to mistake for each other. Some problems are truly cultural and they may take a higher priority, and we don't want to then do a process improvement approach to try to change culture, and vice versa. We might say, oh, we really need to do some alignment sessions and new communications. But if there are flawed processes to start with, that's going to go back and forth between culture and process. It's both. But that also implies that there might be, when we're approaching, should I improve process, should I improve culture, that it's not necessarily the identical toolkit to do both. So when I first made this slide more than 10 plus years ago, it took some convincing to tell people, emotions are a significant predictor of how well a company's performance will be. I used to give this in a very long, detailed way with many examples, but I think through most of the earth, people don't need to be particularly convinced of this. I think everybody has already bought into the idea that, of course, emotions matter. They matter in terms of more traditional business strategy pieces like branding, platforms on social media. We obviously know that consumers and customers are very emotional. They love you and then they hate you and they complain about you on social media. So this is very much an understanding of psychology of human behavior to improve the customer experience and the customer journey. Even to some degree, there are entire businesses that, yes, they have products, yes, they have services, but really what makes them distinctive and sought out as the company of choice is that their value proposition includes an emotional element, what they allow people to feel being in their stores, in their refineries, et cetera. What does the employee experience mean? What does the customer experience mean? All these are jointly linked emotional questions. And that employee emotional question has tons of implications that are very financial. It's recruitment, onboarding, talent retention. It's how we interpret people's communications in very financially driven situations like procurement or mergers and acquisitions. We might say, oh no, that's just numbers. If you have humans involved, it's more than just numbers. Leadership development, critical now to see how a leader handles stress. How does a leader help others to manage their stress? So leadership development even is increasingly more than just how do you stand at a whiteboard and solve a problem, but in fact, how do you deal with people's anxieties and fears and sadness, particularly in something where you're remotely now working with the pandemic. And then another example, this is probably more European and US of a priority in recent years, but internationally, broadly speaking, we are looking more and more at situations of how do we create an environment that can attract top talent, but a diverse workforce. Now, along with this kind of broad concept of emotions mattering in business, there are other shifts in language. For example, many of you probably, particularly if you come from an engineering background, tended to call like calculus and things like that as hard subjects, and that you talk about interpersonal or the ways that people communicate and relate to each other, words like soft skills. At least in the US and in Europe, that term is sort of going out of favor. because these skills are equally rigorous, equally challenging to do correctly, but they involve a different part of the brain, where things like calculus or engineering may involve much more of the intellectual processing centers of the brain, mostly in the middle frontal lobe. These other types of situations, emotions, understanding, stress, conflict, communications, these happen more in the temporal lobe above the ear. They happen in the cingulate gyrus that divides the right versus left sides of the brain. And we're learning every day more about how all these different brain centers are connected.